It was 1919, and a young man from a tiny dusty town in New Mexico had just come back from the First World War with big dreams and very little money. He'd saved up just enough to buy himself a bank in Cisco, Texas, because back then, if you wanted to be somebody, you bought a bank. That was the move. So he arrived in Cisco, found the bank he wanted, tried to negotiate the price, and the owner just wouldn't budge. The deal fell through. He was stuck in this small Texas oil town with money in his pocket and nothing to spend it on. And then a local hotel owner complained to him that he couldn't sleep because his guests kept knocking on his door at all hours looking for rooms. The town was in the middle of an oil boom, and people were flooding in from everywhere, desperate for a bed, any bed. Some guests were actually renting rooms in shifts, like one man sleeping during the day, another man taking the same bed at night. Conrad Hilton looked at that chaos and saw something most people would have just found exhausting. He saw an opportunity. He bought the Mobley Hotel for $40,000, and within about a week, he'd already figured out his first big insight. The lobby was wasted space, a beautiful open lobby that wasn't making him a single dollar. So he ripped it out, converted it into more guest rooms, and suddenly had more inventory to sell. More rooms, more revenue. Simple, but that kind of thinking, finding hidden value in space that everyone else overlooked, that was going to define how he built his entire career. Now, what's interesting about Conrad Hilton is that he didn't come from money, and he didn't have some fancy business education. He grew up in San Antonio, New Mexico, which wasn't even a proper town really, just a trading post his father ran in the middle of the desert. And his father, Augustus Hilton, used to rent out rooms above the store to travelers passing through. So strangely, Conrad had been in the hospitality business since he was a child, watching his father feed strangers and give them a place to sleep. He just didn't know yet that this was going to be his life. By the mid-1920s, he'd bought several more Texas hotels, and things were genuinely going well. He had a system, he had momentum, and he even had a vision of building a hotel in Dallas that would be the greatest in Texas. And then 1929 happened. The stock market crashed, the Great Depression hit, and everything fell apart almost overnight. Banks stopped lending, businesses collapsed, people stopped traveling. Conrad couldn't make payments on his properties, and one by one, the banks started taking them back. At one point, he was so broke that he was borrowing money from a bellboy just to eat. But here's where it gets interesting, because most people in his position would have walked away, found a different industry, started over with something safer. Conrad didn't do that. Instead, he did something that looks almost reckless in hindsight, but turned out to be one of the smartest moves in business history. He stayed, he kept going, and when the Depression bottomed out, and hotels across America were failing and selling for almost nothing, he started buying again. He bought distressed hotels at a fraction of what they were worth, because he understood something that panicking sellers didn't, which is that people will always need somewhere to sleep. The industry wasn't dying, it was just sleeping. And when it woke up, whoever owned the beds would be in a very good position. He also started doing something at his hotels that sounds obvious now, but was genuinely radical at the time. He became obsessed with squeezing every possible bit of revenue out of the physical space. He'd move the bar from a back corner to the most prominent spot in the building because a busy, visible bar drew people in and kept them spending. He'd lease out lobby space to vendors, florists, newsstands, and anyone who would pay for a corner. He called these spaces the Hilton's Little Gold Mine, and over time, these small decisions compounded into something enormous. He wasn't just running hotels, he was engineering them. And then the war ended, and something shifted in Conrad's thinking entirely. Because up until 1945, Hilton had been a very American story, a self-made man building hotels in American cities. But Conrad had this belief, almost a mission, really, that American-style luxury hotels could and should exist all over the world. He famously said, "If you tip the world on its side, everything loose will fall into New York," meaning New York was the center of everything. And if Hilton could represent America in the great cities of the world, then the business opportunities were almost limitless. In 1949, he opened the Caribe Hilton in Puerto Rico, the first of what he called his international ambassadors, luxury hotels in foreign cities that were designed to give American travelers a familiar, comfortable experience wherever they went. And it worked extraordinarily well. The timing was perfect, because after after the war, there was this explosion of international business travel. Diplomats, executives, journalists, all needing places to stay in cities that didn't yet have proper luxury accommodation. Hilton essentially arrived first and planted a flag. By the 1950s, there were Hilton Hotels in Madrid, Istanbul, Berlin, and Cairo. Conrad was photographed shaking hands with world leaders, and he genuinely believed, and this wasn't just marketing, he genuinely believed that by building these hotels, he was helping spread goodwill between America and the rest of the world, which is a fascinating thing for a hotel owner to think about himself, but he wasn't entirely wrong either. There was also something happening on the operational side that deserves a lot more attention than it gets. In 1948, Hilton created one of the first centralized reservation systems in the hotel industry. Before this, if you wanted to book a room at a Hilton in another city, you'd have to call that specific hotel directly and hope someone answered. It sounds ridiculous now, but that was just how it worked. Hilton changed it so that guests could call a central number and book any Hilton property in the country from one place. This made the whole experience so much smoother and more reliable, and it gave Hilton a significant edge over competitors who were still doing things the old way. It seems small, but it fundamentally changed how people thought about hotel chains as a consistent, trustworthy product rather than a collection of individual buildings with the same name on them. By the time Conrad Hilton died in 1979 at the age of 91, the company had grown into something almost unrecognizable from that one overbooked hotel in Cisco, Texas, 60 years earlier, and what he built only kept growing. Today, Hilton has over 7,000 properties in more than 120 countries. It's one of the most recognized brand names on earth. And the wild thing is that you can trace a direct line from a failed bank deal in a Texas oil town all the way to that. Because if the bank sale had gone through, Conrad Hilton would have spent his life managing a small-town bank, and nobody would ever have heard of him. That's the thing about the Hilton story that people don't really talk about. It's not a story about a genius who had a perfect plan. It's a story about someone who missed his first goal completely, stumbled into something else, and then refused to quit even when the whole world seemed to be telling him to. The depression took almost everything from him, and he came back. Every setback in his life, and there were many, just seemed to make him more determined rather than less. He had this phrase he used a lot, "dare to be great," and he genuinely meant it in a very literal way. He thought most people just didn't aim high enough, and that the gap between a good idea and a world-changing one was mostly just courage and stubbornness. And if you want one last strange detail that somehow perfectly captures how far this all went, Conrad Hilton's great-granddaughter is Paris Hilton, who became one of the most famous people in the world in the 2000s entirely because of the name she was born with. A name that started with a failed bank deal and a lobby full of oil workers looking for a bed.